Welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Brandon, and today we're looking at Quintessential Quintuplets. Quints is looking to be a very popular set as it's coming out. Stepping in, this is going to be a very powerful finisher, so it's going to be a deck that you're going to need to pay attention to as we go forward with this set being released. Here's a full list of the deck. We're running green and yellow. Starting off, we have Unstoppable Feelings Ichika. When placed on stage, look at top 3, choose 1, add to hand. When the choice climax is in place, and as long as you have 2 other characters as well, you can pay 1, discard a character to gain the following ability until end of turn, that being when damage is cancelled, you may burn 2 twice. Pretty strong finisher, because we're looking at if your damage doesn't stick, which you're looking swinging for minimum 3, trigger 4. If your 3 doesn't stick, burn 2 twice. You're going to be sticking some damage, and if you're not sticking damage, you're pulling climaxes, so that way you can deal damage in the following turns. There's not a lot of power here, but you don't really need a lot of power if you're going to be burning. Your goal is to close out a game, even potentially from a 3-0, maybe even earlier, because the amount of damage you can actually deal with this combo is pretty insane. Notably, you have to pay the cost on climax play. So pay 1, discard 1 on climax play can be a little bit more on the costly side. To pull off a triple combo of this, you're going to need 9 stock minimum. This does let you basically dig through 9 cards by itself, so you can try to pick up some of the pieces you're missing, as well as the cost effect for the discarding of a character. So really allows you to help set up your finisher and then play it out. Very, very strong finisher. We also then run the Ichika early play. 2 or less gets to play it early. 500 power for each other character. Continuous, so it sits at 11 across turn if you have a full field. It's also a stock healer, so that way you can get some of that stock back, so you can try to save as much stock as possible for the end game. This also gives you a little bit of heal during that level 2 turn. It also provides a big body, which might be important too, so just having some of those key features ready to go. And this really caps off our level 3. As we look at level 2, we have a 2-1 counter, which has our memory kick attached with it. So as long as you get the reverse, you can send your opponent's card to memory. Run it as a 2 of. You're not really looking for power for most of this deck, but there are going to be certain situations where having a memory counter is going to be helpful, namely looking at like 8-choice slime. Memory kick is going to be very useful, and being a 3k backup is sometimes enough to be able to push that power line to get what you need. We then also have this 2-1 Ichika. During your turn, it gains 1500 power for each of your other quintuplet characters. So if you have a full field, that's plus 6k, pushing this up to 12.5 by itself. It also has the ability when you play a choice trigger climax that on reverse you can blind stock. So it's a 2-1, 12.5. If you play the choice climax down during level 2, you could potentially build that stock back into hand. Replenish the stock, big body on field on your turn. Help clear out lanes to help keep going forward. Run it as a 2 of because it's very much a tech choice, depending on how the field's going, depending on what you need to do, and if you have the ability to play the climax early and not trying to save it for that end game turn. Based on game state, this is a really interesting tech choice to try to eliminate different fields, because it acts like a level 3 killer, but it doesn't require a level 3 target. So you could take out 2/2 standby bodies. You could take out potentially early plays, because you play the choice climax, you're sitting at 13.5. So there's definitely a lot of potential with this card to try to answer some questions that the rest of the deck doesn't. As we look at level 1, we have the climax combo with Yotsuba. On attack, if you have the bar in place, mill 2, salvage equal to the level of those cards combined. Pretty common profile. We've seen this now multiple times. We've seen this in Fate with Reen. We've seen this in Slime with Shizu. Notably, that's all that this card does, but it does generate a card back into hand, which I think is very important for this deck. Also gains power, but it only sits at about 6.5 by itself. 6.5 is not going to do a whole lot for that, but as long as you have some other back row pieces that help give additional power, you can kind of meet that threshold to be able to get some kind of reverse on your turn. But the real thing is getting cards back into hand, because you're really trying to just keep pace, essentially, throughout the whole game to get your finisher into field to close out the game. You're more or less stalling the game as long as possible, generating resources, just trying to get you and your opponent to level 3 as fast as possible to close out the game. It's on bar. When you trigger bar, bar goes to hand, so that way you can try to just spam this level 1 combo as much as possible. Realistically, you're trying to stick damage. You're trying to stick damage early to either push your opponent into 3 first, and while you're still early 2, so you can survive and then close out the game from there. Or keep it close, so that way when you reach 3 first, that you can close out the game from. It's really just kind of spamming this combo as much as possible, generating those resources back to hand in order to keep going forward. We also run this level 1 Miku. During your turn, gets power, again since it's about 6-5. When placed, you mill 2 cards, and if there's a climax, you can discard a card and salvage a character. So, mill cards help you generate more cards in waiting room to be able to choose from selectively from your climax combo. And if you do happen to mill a climax, you can then salvage a character. So you're not wasting a climax, if that makes sense. Like you're still benefiting from get climaxes going from your deck to waiting room by just a little bit of hand filter. You get to change out what's in your hand. So you could change that out, for like say a 0 from your climax combo from the previous turn into a card that you want that's a little bit higher leveled. Whether the 2-1 or the early play, able to get this into play, able to get cards from this and benefit from this right away. Next up we have this level 1 Yotsuba. During your turn, you have 2 or more characters, gains 2k power, so again sits at that 6-5 line. This also comes with the ability, when your other character is frontal attacked, pay 1, discard this character to waiting room. That way you can return that character back to your hand. The colloquial term for this that's becoming more and more prevalent that I really, really like is Yotsu Bounce, where you're bouncing one of your own characters back to hand. This helps you to be able to save characters from field back to hand so you can replenish them. An example being like the level 1 combo. Playing this alongside the level 1 combo, you're able to dual the combo. You then convert stock into cards 1-1 essentially by bouncing your character back to hand. You do open up lanes on your board, so you potentially could take more damage. But you're less worried about that if you can keep hand generation going to get to level 3. Notably, you can't just really spam this card to just keep doing it over and over again to get to that point, because you do need stock for the end game, and quite a bit. So you kind of have to play with a balance of using this Yotsu Bounce and the level 1 combo to get generate hand and to generate stock. Next up we have this 1-1 Ichika, back row assist that allows you to, when you trigger choice, that you can discard a character to then look at the top 2 cards of your deck and choose one add to hand. So with the choice trigger, you can bring up one of your cards that has a soul trigger into hand, discard that card again, to then look at the top 2, choose one, to maybe get a card that you need more of into hand, or trying to get into climax or trying to get into something else. Definitely a lot of potential with this card in the back row. Also boosts up your characters by 500 power, so it pushes those 6/5s up to 7. It's also a level assist, so it plays really well with the 2-1 and the early play. If you need to play the power game, you have this available. I run it as a 2 of because of that. For the most part, this card isn't really what you're going to be using, but it has a soul trigger, and so when you trigger twice, you can bring this into hand to play if you need it. Or if you need to, you can use this to get that additional mill. You can keep moving forward as you're going through, because this then has a little bit of synergy with that 1-0 combo. Discarding cards into waiting room again, getting an additional 2 cards into waiting room, and still being able to benefit from the choice trigger with that. We also then run this 1-1 Yotsuba Anti-Change Bomb. It's a 1-1, so plays decently with your level 1 combo. We run 12 level 1s here with this deck, so the likelihood of hitting 1 is pretty high when you do your combo, so if you need to get an Anti-Change Bomb into play, this also allows you to deal with early plays or standby targets a little bit for a more minimal cost. Notably, it's also a stock bomb, so it's an anti-change stock bomb. So they don't go to waiting room, so it does ignore Encore. Just worth noting that this is a pretty decent card to deal with certain situations. Run as a 1 of because you have a lot of selectivity with this deck, especially at level 1. We're going to have resources available to get this if we need to. Moving into level 0, we run this level 0 Ichika. It's a clean cut. During your turn, it gains power. So it sits at 3k on your turn, 2k on your opponent's turn. This is your big card at level 0. We're also trying to use this to help save cards at 0, because realistically the rest of this lineup is going to be rather small. So having an ability to save cards at 0, so you can keep using cards forward, help save resources later in game. Pretty strong profile with this deck and very essential to it. We also then run this Nino. On play top check, you can look at the top card, leave it there, put it into waiting room. So it helps a little bit of selectivity, maybe potentially adding more cards into waiting room for level 1 combo. Also helps you know what your trigger is going to be if you choose to do it that way. You can also, with this card, pay 1 climax swap. So that way you can get the climax you need into hand for that turn. Pretty essential with this deck, especially when you have bar that triggers into hand and you have a choice top end. You can use this to switch that bar into a choice if you need to, so it has that potential there. Also, you can use this, pick this up off the level 1 if you need to switch out choice triggers to bar triggers. So you have a lot of potential with this card regarding like moving things around. Bar into hand, choice is the one you want to close out the game with. So especially with that level 2, you can use that to switch a bar into choice at level 2 and then play choice again at 3. Climax swap is pretty important in this deck. We also run this level 0 Yotspa. Beginning climax phase, you could choose one of your characters to gain 1k power. Since we had a lot of characters sitting at 6-5, this pushes it to 7-5, which is a little bit better in the numbers. Potentially able to get a reverse that way. Also comes with the ability that you can rest 2 of your characters, and if you do, you can give one of your characters on reverse blind stock. Especially with needing stock for the endgame, this becomes very important for this deck, because we need that additional stock to make it to that point. Our goal is to try to spend the least amount of stock as possible and build up stock to get to that point. Recognizing that we need 9 stock, which kind of puts us a little more vulnerable to stock swap, this just helps generate those stock quickly, so you can then turn around and spend them all out. We also run this level 0 Itsuki, exact same profile from the level 0 Toka from Dal in the trial deck. Reveal the top card. If it's a character, add to hand, discard a card. Discard a character, draw 1. Well, technically this can be a single climax out. We're also looking at milling, you're also looking at changing up some of the cards in hand, so it's a hand filter at best. Also can potentially draw into climaxes if you need to. Realistically, this deck relies pretty heavily on climax combos to help generate those resources for the endgame. Another way to get climaxes into hand, pretty essential for this deck. We also run this level 0 Miku. On play, mill 2. If there's a climax, choose one of your opponent's characters and minus 1,000 power from that character. It's also Ricky, so pay 1, put the top card of your deck into your clock, and in this case, you may salvage a character back to hand. The mill helps get characters in waiting room to be able to then salvage. Notably, there's no level restriction on the salvage Ricky, so this is playable throughout the game. It also helps push you closer to level 3, so that way you can keep getting to your level 3 combo and play it out. We also then run this level 0 Yotspa. First ability is you can pay 1, put a climax from your hand into waiting room, and if you do, you can clock salvage, and then clock yourself, and then choose one of your characters to give 500 power. If you have extra climaxes in your hand, you can use this ability to then pay them out, grant power, and salvage from clock. Notably, it's choose 1 card from clock. If you do have climaxes in clock, you can then pay 1, ditch a climax to get a climax out of clock. Second ability is pay 1, rest itself, Brainstorm, mill 4. For each climax revealed, then search your deck for 1 card. So it is a search Brainstormer. Just try to help thin out that deck, try to help get into your next deck a little bit quicker, as well as try to potentially even compress your deck a little bit. You have search access, salvage access, you have blind stocking, you have the Yotsu bounce to return characters back to hand. So being able to convert 1 card, 1 stock, so you're able to convert 1 stock to 1 card. You have a lot of potential with this set to get to that level 3 combo to then close out the game. So you have a lot of things moving forward in order to be able to do it. A lot of different timing pieces, a lot of different check pieces. But overall, this deck can move pretty efficiently. And this is definitely a deck to be prepared for seeing as the set comes out. Whether in locals or beyond, this has potential to close out games very effectively. So again, looking at this deck overall, wanted to really point out a couple different things before we wrap up here. This deck has a lot of potential and a lot of explosive top end. With that in mind, some of the ways that people can play into this, or especially looking at that level 3 combo, tap counter is going to be very effective against this. Being able to shut off a single lane reduces the damage potential that top end has. They've already paid the cost for the effect, so they've already used the resources. Being able to deny its effects are going to be very important here. It's also pretty weak to stock swap if it gets the number of stock into play. Notably, it needs quite a lot of stock, so if you're able to extend the game long and force them to use their resources, specifically stock, and not being able to have enough resources to then triple combo is also something to be aware of as well. Playing this deck, you have a kind of sweet spot that you really want with this deck to go. You want to elongate the game long enough to build up stock, to have 9 stock in play ready to go level 3, but at the same time, you don't want to elongate the game too long that you then run out of hand and have no resources. With that, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, have a good one.